is Dr. Caligari from Operation Monster Force. So I don't know if y'all are familiar with Operation Monster Force or not. This is a really cool 1/12 scale action figure line that goes great with G.I. Joe the Classified series, goes great with Action Force. I mean, it's right there in this kind of a renaissance we're having right now of 1/12 scale military action figures. But it is like a blend of GI Joe meets Universal Monsters and classic horror meets the world of Mike Mignola. It is such a cool concept. I reviewed one of the best action figures of 2025 this past week or the week before, the Donner Party, which is kind of this Americanized version of the Frankenstein monster that was created from some of the bodies of the Donner Party victims who, the group of pioneers heading west that succumbed to hunger and freezing cold and starvation in the Sierra Nevadas in the 1800s. But now he has come back and he has been watching the descendants of the families over the generations, but he's now tied into the larger story of Operation Monster Force. But I'm not even talking about him right now. We're talking about Dr. Caligari. This is a really cool brain in a jar take on the character Dr. Caligari from the silent era German expressionist film. And this is a cool line. Again, it's Big Bad Workshop, which is Big Bad Toys' action figure division, I guess, working with Fresh Monkey Fiction, who has been working on action figures for quite a few years now, with with accessories designed by Gridiron Studios. So pretty cool. You've got Big Bad Toy Store, who's been one of the best retailers out there for collecting action figures. You've got Fresh Monkey Fiction, who's been a pretty good creator. I never picked a lot of their stuff up prior to this line. I take that back. I did collect, I do have some of the Naughty or Nice collection stuff. And then you've got Gridiron, who's very popular for their accessories, the quality, detail, the price of their accessories. And so you kind of have like the action figure equivalent of like a super group or something. So kind of cool. Number 5 is Cable from Marvel Legends series X-Men 97. Cable was on here like last week, I think, as well. He's hanging on for a little bit. First X-Men series, first X-Men 97 series figure that I've reviewed from this newest series, but I do have another one that's going to drop tonight at 10 p.m. It's a decent figure, but I'm a little less happy about it. Some of it because of the price, some of it because of a weird little quality control error. So, hang around tonight, 10 p.m. You can be the first to read it, Eastern Standard Time. Next up is Monkey Wrench from G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe Classified Series, again, probably my favorite ongoing line right now. Monkey Wrench is excellent, man. One of the best figures that they've done this year. And I really think that 2025 has been maybe the best year for the Classified Series thus far. There's just been so many releases that I've been like, okay, I think this is the best figure of 2025. And then another one pops up and another one pops up. Number 4 is another Classified Series release, and it's CoverGirl, Courtney CoverGirl Krieger from the Retro series. So this is an interesting figure. Back in, I think, 2022, I'm actually going to go ahead and check myself here. Back in 2022, Hasbro did release, early 2023, they did release a CoverGirl Classified Series figure that was the very classic look for CoverGirl, brown leather jacket, short, dark red auburn hair, I guess you'd say, that looked like the vintage figure. But it was during a weird time. Remember when Hasbro first transitioned to the plastic-free packaging? I don't know that specifically these two things are connected, but the first series of figures there had some really odd faces. That was the series that we got the classic Outback, where he looked very sunburned, like his face was very red. Now, you can argue Outback might be sunburned, hanging out out back all day, survivalist. But it was a very odd look. This was the series that had Lieutenant Falcon, where he looked like the Matt Damon puppet from Team America World Police. He just was not a great looking figure. And then you had CoverGirl, who looked okay, but instead of being like more of a classic, oh, she's pretty, she looked very sharp features. It was a little bit beyond just like, oh, she's unique and interesting. It didn't look like CoverGirl to me. It looked like there was something off. This version of CoverGirl is based on her early appearances in the Sunbow animated series, where she's blonde and she's wearing a green outfit. One, it's a good figure. You got the swappable hair and stuff. Oh, hold on. I almost closed this window out there. There we go. We don't want to do that. But number two, I honestly like this figure so much because she looks so much not like the classic CoverGirl, whose head I swapped out with Janet Van Dyne's head from the with the Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne Marvel Legends set. But she actually looks like she could be another character. So honestly, I'm going to use her. One of the Star Wars figures I bought last year, the year before, like the only ones I bought is it Osha from Star Wars The Acolyte? I didn't watch the series, but I bought the figure on clearance because I actually thought she kind of looked like a mechanic, which, she had all this gear and stuff. So I've actually kind of got like a crew with some of my people that work on, the G.I. Joe vehicles, the support team. And so OSHA's there, which is kind of a funny code name. Code name's OSHA. Working in the pit, making sure everything's like safe and okay. But I think that this version of CoverGirl is going to go with her there. Clutch is hanging out over there. Some of the people that do that, mechanic work and stuff like that. I don't know. I might give her a new name and have her as a different figure. So rather than CoverGirl, just to kind of, I don't know, expand my Joe shelf, which matters to no one but me. But hey. Number two is Dash Rendar, man. Dash Rendar's hanging in there. This is proof to Hasbro that we need Lebo, we need Guri, we need Chewbacca as Snuva. That was one of my favorite figures from Kenner's Power of the Force 2 as a kid, was Chewbacca as Snuva. I love the weird little like short but massive looking gun that he came with. And I like that his hair was like in a mohawk. I like that he had some kind of like a cybernetically enhanced eye patch, and I liked the axe. Like he had a vibro axe that looked very high tech. Just imagine Chewbacca like jumping into a mess of stormtroopers and just like wrecking everybody with a vibro axe. It was very cool. But Dash Rendar's on there, and man, folks, this is clearly a sign that folks want more Shadows of the Empire. And number one, hanging in here for a bit now, is Cobra Commander with his combat armor. He's a cool figure. He's definitely not one of my like top figures of 2025. He's a great version of Cobra Commander, but people like this version of Cobra Commander. People like Cobra Commander. Classified series is popular. I do feel like if you review action figures a lot of the time, different reviewers do tend to attract like people for different lines. Like, I review some Marvel Legends, but I don't review that many Marvel Legends. There are clearly people who review like every Marvel Legends figure and then talk about them a lot better than I can. But I do think I have a lot. G.I. Joe Classified Series figures do tend to be like my most popular reviews most of the time right now, at least for the last couple years. So anyways, that's the top 6 right now. So why are we talking about 1992 action figures? So I was working recently on my review of Slice and Dice from the G.I. Joe Classified series, which is a great set. Super cool. These are 2 characters who first appeared in 1992 in Hasbro's G.I. Joe Real American Hero Ninja Force subset. There were subsets in the vintage G.I. Joe line, and the first one, I think the first true subset was Tiger Force. Now, I may completely forgotten something for a minute, but Tiger Force was a way that Hasbro was able to re-release popular characters like Flint and Duke and Bazooka and Dusty. Some of these characters, Bazooka, that people knew from the cartoon and the comics, but they were able to re-release them and some vehicles, but also repainting them. So you weren't just re-releasing the same version of the characters, you had a new version of the same, of popular characters. And they started doing this for a number of different subsets. You had Slaughter's Marauders, which was like uh, a blue, green, brown camouflage, although it wasn't as orderly of a camouflage as you would think. I mean, I know camouflage is often kind of warbly or marbled in a sense, but it was an odd paint scheme, but it was neat. And again, as a kid, those were the versions of the characters that were popular in 82, well, not 82, but 83, 84, 85, and start collecting GI Joe 86 or 87. I was pretty young at the time. So those are the ones I had. I had some of the Slaughter's Marauders. That was the version of Mutton Junkyard that I had. Tiger Force, I think I had most of those figures. Most of Tiger Force. I've always really liked Tiger Force. Python Patrol was a great way that they re-released a lot of the Cobra army builders. They re-released Vipers. They re-released the Crimson Guard in Python Patrol colors, but they re-released them. Televiper got a re-release, and Copperhead, who was like the only named character in there that got a re-release. If you see me darting to my left, I've got my Python Patrol figures down in a shelf over this way, so I'm kind of like peeking and picking people out. But later on, they did Night Force as well. Night Force figures came out pretty quickly after the releases, but with Sky Patrol, Hasbro did actually, kind of create new characters, new figures and stuff. But in the 90s, Hasbro really jumped in and trying to figure out what was going to work for G.I. Joe. They really went through a tough period in the 90s where a lot of larger action figures, things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, were definitely outselling G.I. Joe at that point. And so one of the things that Hasbro did was really start focusing on sub-teams that kind of address different issues, may not be the right word, but like there was a team that was DEF, Drug Elimination Force. There was the Eco Force, which, were part of the, there was a very environmentally conscious movement in the 90s, early 90s. And so, Eco Force was there to clean up, kind of G.I. Joe's answer to, you might say, Captain Planet. But one of the ones that came out in 1992 was Ninja Force. And Ninja Force did something that was pretty unique for G.I. Joe figures at the time. They actually had spring-loaded action figures, something that G.I. Joe action figures did not have. They actually had things where you could, lift somebody's arm and they would, slam it down, or, you could twist their waist and they'd twist back. Action figures were nothing, terribly new. Masters of the Universe started using them in 1982, and they were pretty popular at that point, and kind of eventually became synonymous, the action being an action feature in the action figure. But G.I. Joe went ninja crazy. Action features were kind of a weird thing in such a small figure, I guess you could say. But anyways, so I was looking at Ninja Force, and something came to me. I was looking at the 1992 list of figures from yojo.com, and I realized in 1992, I actually only had, as a kid, one G.I. Joe figure from that year. I had Destro. I think it was Destro version 3, I think is the moniker. This is the Destro that looks, I would say he looks similar to the vintage figure. His vest is a bit bigger. His helmet is, you can see his eyes through it instead of it being all like a silver head. A lot of the licensing art and whatnot, the Deep cartoon, used this version of Destro. And I did have the Iron Grenadiers Destro as a kid. That was 1988, so that was during my prime G.I. Joe years. But this was a really exciting figure for me because it was a very classic, version of Destro. To me, he looked like, regular Destro, not the Iron Grenadiers Destro. But I was reviewing that and realized, man, 1992, I owned one G.I. Joe figure. And there were some years like 86, 87, 88. I go back and look and I'm like, how did I end up with almost every G.I. Joe figure from those years? Not all the vehicles or anything, but a lot of the basic figures, I had all of them. And so what it got me thinking was, well, what was I collecting in 1992? And so I took a look. I was using the website Figure Realm, and I actually typed in 1992, and I was like, man, there was so much crazy stuff that came out. It's a pretty interesting year for action figures. So let me set the picture for you, at least from my perspective. 1992. I am 9 to 10 years old in 1992, and I am 10 years old. That may not be right. I'm definitely not 9 to 10 years old in 1992. I am in second to third grade. Let's go with that. I'm really having a hard time thinking about how old I was. So I'm probably more like 8 or 9 years old or something in 1992. So I was in second grade and going into third grade. And so I was looking at, what was I collecting in 1992? What were some of the toy lines that were out there? So pretty sure one of the things that definitely happened in 1992 was I got into the Marvel superheroes and the X-Men toy line from Toy Biz.
Back in my day, I was collecting those X-Men and
Okay.
Marvel characters.
Back in my day, we only had 50 Marvel characters. They didn't have no M's.
I was collecting them.
Yeah, my kids
dinosaurs.
coming and ragging on me. I wasn't collecting dinosaurs until the next year. Real big dinosaurs. Yeah, I'm not that old. Oh, Umbreon 13 likes to come in here and rag on me a little bit. 1992 is when I got into collecting the Marvel superheroes and the X-Men figures. And I will say, and some of y'all will be joking about peg warmers today, but if you do look at the way that action figure and toy companies used to market, they did have toys shipping for a longer time. It was very easy. Like I'm currently looking at a list of what Toy Biz put out for the X-Men line and the Marvel superheroes line. And I know I was collecting those in 1992, but you could pretty easily find the 1991 figures as well. Now, Toy Biz did do a lot of refreshes. They did do a lot of, they'd send the figures back in, or they would make some paint variants and stuff. But even some of the 1990 Marvel superheroes figures, I know were pretty easy to find. And some of that was because Toys R Us. Now Walmart just holds on the stock forever sometimes, or they just don't get stuff. Target very much like they get stuff in, they have their planogram, and then once they hit a certain point, they'll clear out everything, even if it's like, hot and popular and selling. If it's not in their planogram, they get rid of it. Toys R Us was incredible because they really did hold on to stuff. They really did keep toys coming in. And so you could go back and find things, that were not at maybe regular retail stores for a while. And I just remember going in and getting into X-Men, probably, from the animated series, but that also got me into the Marvel superheroes line as well, because they were pretty compatible. 1992 was a year they did a couple, I think there were 2 new series of X-Men figures that year. And one of them had 2 different versions of Wolverine. They had Wolverine 2, which was in the yellow and black tiger stripe costume. And then the Wolverine version 3, which was what I always think of as they call it the Strike Force costume. He's not wearing the mask, yellow and blue. Sabretooth came out that year. Iceman, Forge, Mr. Sinister. The next series had Weapon X. They had Banshee, who was I never had Banshee as a kid. I wasn't real familiar with him back then. But Banshee actually had a whistle built into him. So you literally like could there was a whistle coming out of the back of Banshee, and you blew on it, and he would it would squeal like a whistle. Wild stuff. Gambit. Gambit was out. I remember like Gambit being one of those characters I was actively waiting for, because I was actively waiting for figures who appeared in the animated series. And so Gambit was one I was like looking forward to. I was super excited when it came out. It still, drove me crazy that, we didn't get like a classic Jean Grey, from the animated series for like years in that line. And by then, I don't think I was collecting the X-Men figures actively at that point. Jubilee didn't come out to the Generation X line. So it was crazy because Toy Biz went with some really random characters sometimes that they built figures off of. But X-Force, oh my gosh, I was so into X-Force. I definitely remember I still have him. I don't know if you can see him on my screen here. Yeah. If you look here, boop, right there, that's Deadpool sitting there. That's my original Toy Biz Deadpool from when I was a kid. And oddly enough, there's GW Forge sitting right above him. That's a character. I'm sorry, GW Bridge. I don't know why I said GW Forge. GW Bridge. A character I would love to have in Marvel Legends, because I know still not a whole lot about him. He's not a very popular character, but I love the original. I still have him. And then I actually have Deathlock, my original Deathlock. So had a lot of X-Force figures as a kid. Got really into X-Force too. So I was buying way more Marvel stuff in 1992. Of course, Marvel wasn't the only thing I was buying. It was 1992, and everybody was interested in Batman Returns. Batman Returns was massive. I don't know why. My family never took me to see, my parents did not take me to see Batman in theaters. I'm thinking maybe I was a little too young for the 1989 movie. I probably would have only been like 5 or 6, but I guess they deemed I was old enough for Batman Returns. I will tell you, my daughter loves Batman Returns, but that movie, when you watch it, it is so weird. Like, there are some really weird, just bizarre, uncomfortable things in the movie. I love it. Great Batman. Well, it's a great movie. It's a really weird Batman movie in a lot of ways. The characters, are so odd, and not at all like their comic book counterparts for the most part, at least for Catwoman and Penguin. At the same time, it's a great vision of Batman that's really different. Think of it as an Elseworlds kind of thing. I know so many of us just grew up with it. But 1992, we had Batman Returns, and we had Batman the Animated Series. So I definitely was collecting some Batman stuff. I didn't have a lot of the Kenner Dark Knight collection. I maybe had just like a Joker and maybe 1 or 2 Batmans, maybe 3. I think I had 3 Batmans from it. But I did have some Batman Returns figures. Now, I will say, as a kid, oddly enough, I was not Batman crazy and like buying every variant of Batman. The Collector D3W says Batman Returns was perfect for an action figure line. It really was. Going back and looking at it, Kenner put out a lot of product, but my gosh, they were so lazy. Batman is literally the same figure from the 1989 Dark Knight collection, or at least the Dark Knight collection came out in 1990, but it was based on the 89 film. They really got their mileage out of that sculpt. They straight up re-released so many figures, and the Penguin is like a weird amalgam of like the earlier he's like the Superpowers Penguin, just painted black and red and white. The Penguin Commandos are great. The Catwoman was actually pretty solid for a 1992 movie action figure. She definitely looked like Michelle Pfeiffer, and that was definitely appreciated by 1992 me. It was just really cool versus the Penguin, who I'm like, this doesn't look anything like Danny DeVito's Penguin. But it was a cool line. I did have the Batmobile from Batman Returns that, split in half. So you had the middle car and the two side parts could actually operate as like their own drones or anything. So I was definitely picking up Batman Returns stuff in 1992. I'm sure I was not alone there. So what were some of the other things I was into in 1992 that I'm looking at? One of them, and this was already mentioned here, Kenner's Terminator 2. I did, at some point as a kid, I was finally allowed to watch Terminator 2, not the first one. I didn't see the first one until probably I was in like middle school or high school. But Terminator 2, you could not avoid the Terminator in 1992. I mean, it was huge. Even if you didn't, see the film, I mean, Arnold was just like a pop culture icon. He was posing with the president. He was doing all of the, like, what, America's fitness challenges or whatever, and school kid stuff. I mean, he was like a, kind of like a real life superhero at that point in time. And Terminator was everywhere. Like, I remember going to the barber at one time, and I was like, I want a haircut like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. I was like super scrawny. I wasn't that tall. And they're like, okay, a flat top? And I'm like, yes, I want a flat top. And they're like, all right, well, you have to use a lot of gel and mousse for that. And for some reason, like, I was terrified of the thought of having, gel or mousse in my hair. And then I ended up with my first buzz cut because I was like, all right, we'll just cut it off. I was just like scared to have gel or mousse in my hair. So anyways, that was kind of weird, but I distinctly remember that. I had a friend that lived next door to me, and oh man, the collector had the leather jackets. Yes, super cool. I had a neighbor that had a leather jacket. He was really in the Terminator. He had these glasses that were like, the big black glasses, but they had like a red crosshair across one of the eyes, and they were pretty cool. Remember, there was like this, it wasn't Terminator, but there was like a laser pistol that, like, I swear every KB, every toy store had. It had like a clear red dome across the top barrel, and it played like the same 7 or 8, sounds, in like repeat or something. And he had like one of those guns, and he was the Terminator for Halloween. But anyways, guys over at my house and brought over the Power Arm Terminator figure from Kenner's Terminator line. And man, I got like super into these action figures, and I have finally went back a number of years ago and did end up like collecting the rest of the Terminator 2 line, at least the main Kenner releases and the Future War figures. And I even ended up with 1 or 2 of the ones from the, what was it, Terminator 2 3D, that was the Universal Studios park. They actually had some like repaints of them and stuff. It was a cool line. I will say, one of the difficult things about the Terminator 2 action figure line is the color change one. If you talk about White Hot T1000, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have a White Hot T1000 because he's like a brown metal, like a brown copper iron color, and you put him in hot water and he kind of turns like a whitish color. I need to go back and look at them at some time. Maybe someday I'll just have them all like, here on the desk, and, we'll look at them like that. One of the things with the Terminator 2 line was there was a limited number of people in the line. Like, you had the Terminator. They did make a John Connor figure. And then you had the T1000. And then there was Cybergrip. Was that his name? He's from Future War. He's like this weird looking guy with like tubes in his face, and one of his hands was a claw. He had like a little machine pistol or something. And then there was like a really tall guy called Chromium or something. But yeah, there weren't a lot of characters. So you could definitely like use the different Terminator, the T-800 endoskeletons. Like, sometimes I would use those as like, oh, these are the evil Terminators. And, so you'd have like more people to fight. I threw in some of my, I had some Chuck Norris Karate Commandos figures. I had, I had like a Chuck Norris. I had, oh my gosh, was his name Kempo? He was like a, maybe like a samurai or something with a yellow and green. I used some of those guys as well. I had some figure from, I may have one of the Commando figures too that I kind of threw with my Terminator stuff just because, I need more characters for battles and things. Super into Terminator though. I did collect them for a while. I will say I did eventually get at some point. I wanted the Bioflesh Regenerator set. They had this set. A lot of the Terminator things had, you could like, there was one Terminator. I don't do a lot of research for these and in advance. Sorry about that, guys. There was one. He's a first series Terminator figure, and I mean, he looked like Arnold. Looked like Arnold in a like a a sleeveless T-shirt. And he's got like a tank. He's like a tank top. He had a shotgun with him, and his action feature was when you pull his arm down, the front of his whole body is like one piece, and it's a projectile, and it flies off, and you can see a bit of the T-800, endoskeleton under there. Yeah, army builders and stuff. Sometimes you couldn't get them. I don't know. The Terminator line, I did have more variants than other lines. I guess because they were pretty different looking. They did at least mix them up a good bit. But so a lot of the Terminator figures did have this cool feature where, like, stuff popped up. You wanted to reveal that endoskeleton underneath. Well, they had this playset called a Bioflesh Regenerator, and the idea was supposed to be that you could take these plastic T-800 skeletons that they weren't articulated that I remember at all, and you put them in this machine and you filled them with something called Bioflesh, which was like you mixed water with it, and it was kind of like a doughy substance, but it was softer. And I just remember finally getting it, and it was just an absolute mess. It was like a nightmare. I tried to use the molds with Play-Doh, and it just looked stupid. And so I ended up returning it. Like, I remember, my mom apparently deemed that it was so, not working properly or the way it should have been that, we returned it. So, Terminator 2, pretty cool line, had a lot of fun with. Here's a really weird one that I came across, but I had some of them. Land of the Lost. I vaguely remember this show. Now, I'm not talking, I don't remember the 70s Sid and Marty Krofft version at all. I know of it. I don't, I was clearly not born at that time yet. Yeah, that's what happened. Would you give me my money back on this bag of goo? Man, I want to tell you guys like the best story about my mom. Now, my mom is incredible. My mom is still an incredible person. I love my mom so much. Like, I literally still could call my mom and be like, oh, mom, and I mean, not at all, but like I could, if I started like mentioning some action figure or something like, oh, they're putting out this new Sentinel. He's really cool. And gee, I'd sure like to get him for Christmas. My mom would probably like go on Hasbro Pulse and try to find like the X-Men 97 Sentinel or something. And, but my mom is super generous. But my mom would kill me. Like, I hope she does not watch this live stream. So when I was a kid, I was really into Ren and Stimpy. My dad and I were into Ren and Stimpy. We would watch it together and just laugh and laugh and laugh. And so, a couple years ago, we got him the Ren and Stimpy DVDs for Christmas just because we remember, like, I remember watching them with him as a kid. Anyways, there was a comic book series. And so we did have a comic book store like right near the house. Like it was probably less than 5 minutes. And you'd go up there and, get comic books or pogs or, collectible cards and stuff like that. Well, we actually had a pull box for a little bit. Again, this is like super cool. I was like probably in 3rd, 4th grade, maybe even 5th grade. I had a pull box there. And we were going up there. And there was one issue of the Ren and Stimpy comic. I want to say it was like maybe issue 25. I gotta look this up real quick. Shredded Ren and Stimpy cover. Let's see. That's a oh, there it is. Well, maybe. Which issue is it? I'm not going to let the facts get in the way of a good story. So there was an issue of the Ren and Stimpy show that really made fun of the fact that, you know, all of the 90s covers where they had, you know, with the comic where the guy shot through the stack of comics, or all the ones that use holograms, or, you know, die cut comics and stuff like that where they cut out, you know, slots in the cover. Well, there was a Ren and Stimpy that Stimpy had been like shredding the cover, and so it had cuts in it. So we went to pick up the pull box, and it was a little more unusual. My mom's like, aren't these usually, you know, $1.25? The guy's like, oh, well, this month it's, you know, it's $2.25 or something. My mom's like, well, why is that? And the guy's like, well, you know, this one is like a 25th, you know, issue. It's a special, you know, it's a special collector's cover. It's used as a thicker cardstock, and it's been, you know, pre-cut or pre-shredded. And my mom looks at the guy and she's like, for $1, I could shred the cover myself. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, you know, being like, man, like, you know, 3rd or 4th grade me in the comic store, like trying to be super cool. And I'm like, dying inside. I'm dying inside. Anyways, my mom is fantastic, but I hope and pray she never watches this. So anyways, yeah, 1992. What the heck was I talking about? Sorry, y'all. You guys get me off track. Oh, Land of the Lost. Land of the Lost. I remember the show vaguely, but I think my cousins were into it. Maybe my aunt watched the original. My aunt would probably have been the right age to watch the original. I had 2 cousins. They seemed to be really into it. I remember one year for my birthday, I guess it was 1992. I got Land of the Lost figures. And I mean, they were cool. They had some neat accessories. They were by Tiger, who I was just mostly familiar with Tiger because of, mostly familiar with Tiger because of the little handheld video games, Tiger Electronics. But I guess they also made Land of the Lost action figures. So I had a couple of them. Honestly, the biggest thing I remember is later on, some of them got used with Jurassic Park. You know, they never made Lex from Jurassic Park. So the little girl with the glasses from Land of the Lost, she was my Lex. I don't know why. That's what I had, I guess. Remember the raft, like the raft from Land of the Lost. You know, so that was pretty cool. But you know, it was a weird line. Like I wasn't really attached to it. I mean, I sold them off at some point as a kid, but I did have I had more Land of the Lost figures in 1992 than I bought new G.I. Joe figures, which is, you know, which was kind of the thing that struck me as weird. Not Mad Max, Mighty Max. Mighty Max is still one of my favorite lines. And listen, my daughter never really got into Polly Pocket. Polly Pocket kind of had a resurgence. I'm certainly not going to go buy a Polly Pocket toy for myself, but I still look at them like, man, they're just so cool. But why are they not bringing Mighty Max back? I miss the days of micro figures, Micro Machines, military stuff. I loved it. The Star Wars Micro Machines from Galoob are still some of my favorite toys of all time. I have a almost complete collection of what Galoob released. I love Army Micro Machines. All the military stuff was super cool. You guys never got Land of the Lost figures in Germany. And now you live in Mexico. Interesting. Find them frequently at the flea market. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't think they're that expensive, but you just never see them. You know, you don't see them that often. So that's cool that you run across them from time to time. I mean, the dinosaur guys were pretty cool. You know, the dinosaur guys were pretty cool. There was like the jungle lady, Kirsta, I don't know. I remember her being cool. I remember the dad, it was like Tom Porter. His backpack was cool because you could actually put stuff with it. He had a flashlight. Like I used those with Jurassic Park figures for years. But he had this weird like fighting thing where he just like turned like this. And it was like the weakest looking punches you ever, you know, you could imagine. It looked like, you know, I don't know, looked like the Three Stooges trying to hit somebody or something. But man, I miss micro figures. Mighty Max is like the greatest thing ever. Mattel started putting them out in 92. And I remember getting the Skull Mountain. Is Skull Mountain behind me? Skull Mountain is behind me. If you, oh, there it is. If you look above my finger there, you can see Skull Mountain up there. Yeah, I got that for Christmas in '92, and I mean, I freaking love Mighty Max. It was incredible. They've got to bring Mighty Max back. Maybe, I'm not saying this is like, the solution to everything. It's not the most important thing in the world, but maybe right now, with higher prices and things, maybe we need to think smaller. Maybe micro figures need to make a comeback. Things like, micro machines like the Battle Zones, Mighty Max, things that fold up and down. Kenner and Hasbro made a lot of little micro sets as well in the mid to late 90s. Remember the Godzilla sets? Man, those were so cool. The fact that you could get like one toy and it was a play set, and you had some vehicles and you had little figures, and I just thought they were the best things ever. Mighty Max was so exciting when it came out. I just didn't think I'd ever seen anything quite like it, and to me it was still always like, the criterion by which I would measure any kind of micro set. Gosh, Mighty Max 1992. I collected Mighty Max pretty hardcore for a while. I had a lot of my originals I kept, and I've picked some up over the years as well. So I'm gonna run through a couple others I realized I bought a lot more of. Here's what Snailians, JPI Snailians. Got really into Snailians in second grade. There was a kid in my class. Oh gosh, his name was Vance, and he was really into Snailians. And so like we had a Christmas. Now that I'm sitting to think about it, this might have been. Snailians might have been out in 92 or 91, but went into 92. But anyways, this kid put it in a, you buy a Christmas gift and you kind of like play a game and people end up with different gifts. Well, he had a Snailian, man. I definitely came home, with a Snailian, and they were really weird, but really cool. They were snails in armor. The figures were not articulated. They had like shells, like their shells, were almost like big not suction cups. Like the little rubber toys that are like a contact lens shape, and you put dome and you put them down and you can like flip them inside out and then they'll like jump up in the air. That was Snailians. 1992 though, the biggest thing that I got into, and still one of my favorite toys of all time. I had some Ninja Turtles that year. I had some of the King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. That was a weird line. The Masters of the Universe slime pit was supposed to be reused for King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. There's even a couple elements of some of the Knights of Justice villains that actually have Masters of the Universe origins and inspiration in them. Interesting fact. But Alien. Kenner's Aliens, I should say, not just Aliens. Kenner's Aliens line is one of my favorite action figure lines of all time. I love it. And I get excited when somebody puts out Aliens toys that go with it. I have some of the Super 7 Aliens figures posed alongside or near my complete Kenner Aliens line that includes those European figures, Vasquez, Hudson, and O'Malley. I've got some of the, Lanyard. Yeah, that makes the core. They had the Aliens figures a few years ago. Some of them were like super cheap, but then again, the figures themselves were not expensive, but their aliens were pretty cool. They're all bright colors, but they're actually pretty neat. NECA tried to come back and make some of the classic, Kenner-inspired Aliens toys. They made their own figures from newer movies. They were cool. I wish they would have been let free a little bit more to do more, but they just didn't seem to sell that well. But Aliens, I loved Aliens. So I got really into Aliens. Man, King Arthur was a short-lived line. It was a weird line. Football players who get set back in time to join the Knights of the Round Table, a guy named Arthur King who goes back in time. And they were kind of neat, but at the same time, you're right, there weren't many of them. The villains were cooler than the heroes, I think, which sometimes happens in a short line like that. I don't know. As a kid, I ended up with some of them. Mattel did them. They used a lot of re-releases and stuff. Aliens. I got into Aliens. I had a friend, I've mentioned him in reviews. He lived across the street from us or a little down the way. He was Japanese, and and so like he would sometimes come back with stuff, like his family would go over to Japan and come back, and he'd have like these crazy toys that I'd never seen before. So sometimes he would have some like really fascinating stuff. But one day he came over and he had the gorilla alien from Kenner's Aliens line. Well, I had never seen Alien. I wasn't familiar with it. I'm not gonna say like my dad did seem to be into horror stuff. He read a lot of Stephen King and things, but I don't know. Like my parents just didn't like, tell me about these kind of things or show me a lot of the stuff. So I was like, what is this? Like the gorilla alien was like, metallic blue, but lots of black and dry brushing, and I mean a pretty intimidating looking figure, really. He had the head that like was bulbous and it squirted. You fill him with water, so he like sprayed acid on people, and he had like the big arms that, So let's call my friend Freddie. So my friend Freddie, comes over one day and he's like, check this out. So we're sitting there messing around. The aliens like fighting X-Men and stuff like that. Of course, he's like telling me everything about Alien and, oh yeah, this happens in Alien, and this happens in Aliens, and this happens in Alien 3. And I mean, just Alien 3. Was Alien 3 out yet? Let me check. What year was Alien 3? I gotta look real quick. See, sometimes I'm like, I hit Alien 33. That one's not out yet, but oh yeah, it came out in 92. Yeah, so I mean, he'd probably see it. This guy seemed to be able to watch anything. He didn't seem to have any kind of like limitations or anything. So anyways, we're sitting there playing with it. I'm like, man, that's super cool. My birthday was coming up. So my birthday comes. Freddie comes to my birthday. What's he got? Everybody else has got packed, wrapping paper and stuff. Maybe something wrapped in the funnies. Freddie's got a Kmart bag. What's in the Kmart bag? Oh my gosh, the gorilla alien. And he's been stapled back on the card. And so he gave me the gorilla alien. Oh my gosh. So I was actually pretty excited because I really wanted the alien. I really wanted an alien. Here was an alien. And then after the party, Freddie's like, hey, guess what my mom bought me at Kmart? And it was like, the Alien Queen and Ripley and Hudson. I'm like, I'm kind of wondering if Freddie's mom took him birthday shopping for me. And I got the secondhand alien, but hey, it was all right. It was all right. So Freddie and I over time, like we would buy, kind of coordinate, we'd buy aliens or X-Men figures, and then we would go through weird things and like trade them. Like, he would decide he wanted money to buy something, so he would sell me like a bunch of X-Men figures, or he would want to trade all the X-Men figures for aliens, or we'd trade all the aliens figures for X-Men. I don't know. We just like pass these things back and forth or whatever. So, but Alien was definitely one of the best lines in 1992. I was looking through Figure Realm because you can search by year. Some of the other ones that popped up I just thought were interesting was that Addams Family line that was like based on an animated series. I just remember Gomez seeming to be everywhere. I don't remember seeing any of the other figures anywhere. And oddly enough, it looks like they never got around to making Wednesday. Imagine that, Addams Family line that didn't even get around to putting out a Wednesday figure. I guess back then, maybe, but today it'd be crazy. That was just one that popped up. But there were some odd lines. I mean, Aladdin stuff was popular, like the movie. Kind of was always interested. I guess the only other G.I. Joe thing I did buy in 1992, I did have a couple of the Hall of Fame figures. I know I had Duke and Snake Eyes, which these are the 12-inch G.I. Joes. But yeah, so 1992, I was just shocked because I didn't remember a year where I wasn't buying a lot of G.I. Joe stuff. And then I was like, 1992 doesn't look like I bought that many G.I. Joe toys as a kid. I did have a lot of the Ninja Turtles from 92. They were getting kind of weird. It was like the Western Turtles, and I had some of the Mutant Olympic Turtles, and the ones that spit water that were like the beach comber, one of like the Michelangelo and like a straw beach hat or something. So I was definitely kind of getting out of Ninja Turtles at that point, I think, at least in buying the action figures. But it was kind of interesting looking back. That year for Christmas, I think we got a Super Nintendo. I think we got the Super Nintendo that year, and I remember for Christmas that year wanting the Mighty Max Skull Mountain, and I got that, or Skull Island, Skull Mountain. I'm trying to remember offhand now which one it was called. I remember somebody's calling me. I'm going to decline that. Potential spam, unless it's one of you guys, but you don't have my phone number. I remember really wanting something called Video Painter, which was like this video painting device. And I don't know, I remember really wanting it. And my parents surprised me. Instead of Video Painter, we ended up getting a Super Nintendo with Mario Paint. I'm pretty sure that was second grade, 1992, because I was in third grade. That tracks there. So it was a pretty cool Christmas, getting Mario Paint. I think Mario Paint was probably superior to Video Painter from what I can remember. And I remember in third grade, so this was 1992 for Christmas, we had to write what we wanted in our stocking. We had to write, 2 or 3 sentences about what we wanted to find in our stocking, and we had to draw a picture. And so I did draw a picture of really what was Toy Biz's Wolverine version 2. So again, yellow and black costume with the tiger stripes. But I remember when I drew mine, I did draw him with a removable mask. So mine was kind of like an amalgam of, probably the version 1, 2, and 3 figures. So that was pretty cool. One thing that I did get that was really cool, I still have it over here. I'll pull it out real quick. I got Wolverine. Just trying to figure out. So I keep getting a call coming through that's spam. I need to put my phone on silent for a second. I didn't put the please silence your messages before the live stream today. But one of the things I did get, I didn't get Wolverine on my stocking. I think I got him as a gift. So that was, just the same. But I do have a stocking stuffer from 1992 that I still have, and I'll grab it real quick because it's over with my Marvel Legends stuff. If you've ever seen one of these, they're one of those great rack toys, toys that basically toy companies had, cheap toy companies, and they would put stickers on them or repackage them. So this is one of those little bombs. You actually would put a single cap on it, on the tip, like a single little red cap. And then it doesn't really work well, my daughter and I used it a couple years ago, but you would basically, oh, there it goes. Okay, you would lock the spring in there, put the cap, and when you drop it, it would bust the cap. I don't know. It's pretty cool. It looks like a bomb, but this one actually has, you see that? It's got the X-Men logo, and it says X-Men 1991 Marvel. I actually got this in my stocking that year, and I still have it with my Marvel Legends stuff. So Wolverine was what I wanted in my stocking, and I don't know that third grade me could have imagined how many freaking Wolverine figures I have today. Just got the World War II Wolverine, the X-Men 97. There's 2 or 3 Wolverines they just released there. Collector D3W says the NES was already an upgrade for me. I had the Atari 2600 for the longest time. I did not have an Atari 2600. NES was our first system, and I did have a Game Boy, and then the Super Nintendo. So remember that Christmas? I remember playing Super Mario World a lot that year. We probably beat it by New Year's. My dad was really into playing the 2D Super Mario Brothers games. And I will make an announcement. My daughter and I, we played through Paper Mario, the Origami King, when it came out, beat it together. But over Thanksgiving break, or just this past weekend, she started playing on her own and beat it within a week or so. So it's pretty cool. She played it on her own, and she'd played it before and got stuck, got all the way through it. So good for her. We're hoping that, or I'm sure she's hoping that Santa Claus brings some more Switch games this year in the stocking, or packaging, gifts, boxes, and whatnot. I'm sure I'm sure more will show up at some point. So, anyways, 1992. Somebody mentioned Conan. I liked the Conan figures. I never had any. I've never owned any of those Conan figures that were out in 92. I have some Conan figures. I mean, I have some of the McFarlane ones. I have some of the like the Frazetta, the statues that I can't remember the name of the company, but I reviewed a couple of them, but they were like plastic statues, maybe called World of Frazetta or something. I had the Marvel Toys Conan from the legendary comic book heroes line, but I never had some of the NECA Conans, but I never had any of those Conan figures. And I'm trying to remember who put those out, but that was from the animated series that was like Conan the Adventurer, right? They were called Conan the Adventurer. Oh yeah, here they are. Internet's a wonderful thing. You can look up so many old toys on there. Hasbro put those out. Interesting. I remember always thinking they were fascinating, but I never ended up with any of them. I don't know. I remember Zula being everywhere. I remember seeing Zula a lot with the missile launcher. I don't remember seeing Rathamon much. Maybe it was like some of the guys were harder to find, and it was kind of, I don't know. Sometimes like you'd see some toy lines and you'd be like, man, I buy these, but I can't ever find the ones that I'm interested in. Like when I was looking at the Addams Family line from 92, I'm like, I remember Gomez and Fester, and I don't remember seeing anybody else ever in the stores. It was just kind of that kind of thing. And sometimes if you couldn't find like all the characters, or you didn't see that many of them, you're like, I don't know. There's just not a lot of selection or variety here. So anyways, if you're listening to this later on, go ahead in the comments and tell us, what were some of your favorites, toys and action figures. I got a visitor here, hey, from 1992. Curious to hear about it. What were you looking forward to in Christmas of 1992? Like I said, Mighty Max Skull Mountain was one of my things. I clearly wanted a Wolverine. I remember getting a lot of X-Force figures, and Super Nintendo was actually a big surprise. Though I'll be honest, my dad probably played, at least with Mario, about as much as I did. So anyways, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. It is 9:30, so we've been on here about an hour. So you guys have a great week. Collector says he bought Star Wars figures. They were on sale and much later got really into them. Like, were you buying the classic Kenner figures? Like they were still on sale? I don't remember ever seeing Star Wars figures, though. Granted, I don't know. Okay, that's so great. It's crazy to me to think that, like, just because, like I said, I'm 42. It's crazy to me to think like Star Wars figures being at retail at some point. Now, I will say, and this is the last story. It's your last story you're getting from me. When I was a kid, we went to a church in Cincinnati. We lived in Cincinnati for a little bit. We went to a church for a little bit, and we had like a Sunday school class. So I had been very young. If I was in kindergarten, I would be surprised. I was probably in kindergarten or preschool. But we had a Sunday school class, and they would have, now looking back on it, somebody had like a box, and you could go pick something out of it. One time, I got a Superpowers Hawkman who was in a mailer box, and another time, I got an Emperor Palpatine. I still have my Emperor Palpatine, who was in a mailer box. So, Cincinnati, Ohio, 1986, 87. The best thing I can think of is I bet somebody in that class, like a Sunday school teacher or someone, or at the church, worked for Kenner back then. That's the craziest thing I can think about was back then. That's the only time like I ever encountered a Star Wars figure that, wasn't at like an antique store or a collector shop, but that was like still in the package like that. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know who the Emperor was. Like I said, my parents weren't really into like genre stuff like that. And so when I was in like middle school and got super into Star Wars, I started thinking about why do I remember having a figure of this guy, of the Emperor? And so, which I thought his name was Emperor Palpatine for a while. I don't know why. That was just a weird thing when I was like in 6th grade. I thought he was like Emperor Palpatine. But again, not Star Wars was not everywhere back then, or at least it didn't seem to me. And so I went and looked, and like in my G.I. Joes, and sure enough, there's the Emperor. He was hanging out with my G.I. Joes. It's a weird thing. So you guys have a great night. God bless. Everyone take care. And I'll see you guys next week. Stay tuned. actionfigurebarbecue.com. Remember, I said there's a new review coming up in less than 30 minutes. 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. Take care, everybody.